Look what I made.
That is beautiful, dear.
You are a natural at this.
Not since college took over our lives, but the place still smelled like sun-warmed wood and coffee. I remember stepping inside, my shoes clicking softly on the tiles, and there she was, his mom, standing by the counter, sunlight tracing gold through her black hair. She turned, surprised at first, then smiled, that kind of slow, knowing smile that made you feel like you'd been caught doing something you shouldn't, even when you hadn't. "You've grown," she said, tilting her head with that amused warmth only women her age seem to have. Her voice had this low, easy confidence, not flirty, not formal, just aware. I laughed awkwardly, trying to shrug it off, but something about her gaze lingered longer than before. She poured me lemonade, and I couldn't help noticing the way she moved, graceful without trying, the soft laugh lines near her eyes giving her face more charm than any filter or youth could. It wasn't just attraction, it was presence. She filled the room without even speaking much. Ryan was upstairs, so it was just the two of us for a few minutes. We talked about the usual things, classes, life, the heat. I told her how strange it felt being back home, how people seemed smaller, quieter. She chuckled and said, "That's because you got bigger, in ways you don't even see yet." That line stuck with me, not because of the words, but how she said them, gentle, teasing, almost like she was testing something unspoken between us. She brushed past me to grab a dish from the counter, and I swear, for a heartbeat, everything slowed down. The scent of her perfume, something warm and faintly floral, wrapped around me. It wasn't intentional, but it felt like she knew exactly what it did to me. Then Ryan called from upstairs, and the moment dissolved. She looked back at me, a hint of mischief tugging at her lips. "He'll be down in a minute," she said. "You can wait here, if you can behave." The words were playful, but they landed deep, like a spark on dry leaves. I laughed, maybe too quickly, pretending not to notice. But inside, something shifted. That afternoon, sitting in the living room with her laughter echoing softly from the kitchen, I realized the summer wasn't going to be like any other. There was a current between us, quiet, patient, but undeniably there. And though neither of us said it out loud, we both felt it. Something had begun. The next few days felt strangely different, quieter in some moments, louder in others. Maybe it was just me, noticing her too much, or maybe she wanted to be noticed. Every time I came over to hang out with Ryan, she found a reason to pass through the room. A folded towel here, a glass of water there. Always smiling, always half distracted, like she knew I was watching. One afternoon, Ryan left for a quick errand, leaving me behind. I sat in the living room, scrolling through my phone, trying not to feel awkward. Then her voice came from a hallway, soft, playful. "You're awfully quiet today." I looked up, and she was leaning against the doorway, casual but composed, her dark hair tied loosely, a few strands falling near her face. She wore a light blue blouse and jeans, simple but somehow elegant, like she didn't need to try. "Just tired," I said, pretending to look uninterested. She walked closer, a glass of iced tea in her hand. "Tired? At your age? You've barely lived yet." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes had that same unreadable warmth, curious, amused, maybe even a little daring. I smiled, trying to think of something clever, but words slipped away. She noticed, of course. "You still get shy, don't you?" That hit a nerve. Not in a bad way, just enough to make me flustered. I stammered something about not being shy, which only made her laugh softly. "Oh, really?" she said, stepping a little closer. "Maybe you just need better lessons." The air shifted. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Calm, controlled, like every syllable was meant to test how far I'd look before looking away. Then she smiled, slow, deliberate, and turned to fix a picture frame on the wall, pretending not to notice the silence she left behind. "Relax," she said lightly. "I'm just teasing." But I could tell she knew the effect she had. She asked about college, about my classes, about what kind of girls I liked. The way she phrased it made my throat tighten. "Girls your age," she mused. "They don't really know what they want, do they?" I shook my head, trying to sound casual. "Guess not." Her eyes found mine again, steady, amused. Maybe you just need someone older to teach you what they don't. That line hung between us, electric, impossible to ignore. Before I could say anything, the sound of the front door snapped us both back. Ryan's voice called from outside. She straightened, smoothing her blouse, and smiled like nothing had happened. "Saved by the bell," she said softly, turning away. But as she walked toward the kitchen, she looked over her shoulder just once, and the glance said everything words couldn't. For the rest of the day, that look wouldn't leave my mind. The sky turned gray that Friday afternoon, and by evening the rain had settled in, steady, quiet, and strangely comforting. Ryan had left early for a weekend trip with some friends, and I'd promised to drop off a book he'd lent me. When I reached their house, the porch light was already on, soft against the falling rain. She opened the door before I could even knock. "You'll catch a cold out there," she said, stepping aside so I could enter. Her voice had that same warmth, the kind that felt like safety and danger at the same time. She was wearing a loose white sweater and jeans, her hair falling freely over her shoulders, darker now from the humidity. I told her I'd just come to return Ryan's book, but she smiled faintly. "You always say that," she teased, "and yet you never seem to leave right away." I didn't have a response, maybe because she was right. She handed me a towel and said, "Stay until the rain slows down. No point running off in this weather." I nodded, sitting on the couch while she walked toward the window, pulling the curtains slightly to watch the downpour. The soft rhythm of rain filled the room, broken only by the quiet hum of her breathing. I found myself watching her reflection in the window, the way she tilted her head, the calm curve of her smile. She didn't need words to draw attention. She just existed in a way that made the space feel alive. "Do you like the rain?" she asked suddenly, still looking outside. "Yeah," I said. "It makes everything feel slower." She turned her head toward me, eyes glinting under the soft yellow light. "Maybe that's what you need to slow down and actually feel things." She walked closer, sitting on the armchair across from me. "You rush through life. Everything's fast. You think you're grown because you've seen a bit of the world, but there's so much you haven't learned yet." I frowned slightly. "Like what?" Her lips curved, that familiar teasing smile. Like how to sit with silence without needing to fill it. How to look someone in the eyes and actually see them. The air thickened. Her voice was quiet, but every word sank deep. She leaned back, crossing her legs, eyes never leaving mine. "I could teach you, you know," she said softly, "if you're willing to learn." For a moment, neither of us moved. The rain kept tapping against the window like it was part of the conversation. Then lightning flashed outside, and she laughed lightly. "Don't look so serious," she said, rising to her feet. "I'm only teasing." But she wasn't. Not entirely. When she brought me a cup of coffee a few minutes later, our fingers brushed, just briefly. Still, it was enough. Warm, fleeting, but real. And as I watched her move through the room, I realized she wasn't just teasing anymore. She was teaching me how to feel. It was a Saturday evening, quiet, warm, and heavy with the scent of rain still clinging to the air. Ryan was still out of town, and she'd texted me earlier that day. "If you're free, I could use help fixing the garden lights." It sounded innocent enough. Maybe it was. But part of me already knew it wouldn't feel that way once I was there. When I arrived, the backyard was softly lit by the fading orange sky. She was kneeling by a row of small lanterns, her hair tied loosely, the glow from the setting sun brushing against her skin. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, calm, composed, like she'd been expecting that moment. "Perfect timing," she said. "I can't figure these out." I crouched beside her, the air thick with that quiet tension that had been growing between us. We worked in silence at first, just the sound of crickets and distant thunder, until she sighed and sat back, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You always show up when I least expect you," she said softly, her tone somewhere between amused and thoughtful. "Maybe you just expect me more than you think," I replied before I could stop myself. She looked at me for a long second, not surprised, not offended, just studying. Then she smiled faintly. "You've learned to answer back," she said. "That's new." Her words carried something unspoken, something that made my pulse quicken. She reached for one of the small lanterns, her fingers grazing mine as she adjusted the wire. The touch was light, almost accidental, but the warmth of her skin lingered. When the lights finally flickered on, she clapped softly, her eyes lighting up with genuine joy. "See, you did it," she said, then added in a quieter tone, "You always do." We stood side by side, watching the tiny bulb shimmer in the dusk. The glow painted her face in gold and amber, catching every soft line, every trace of time that made her more beautiful. I didn't say anything, I just looked, and maybe she felt it because she turned slightly, her eyes meeting mine. "You shouldn't look at people that way," she whispered. "Ow, like you're trying to memorize them." I swallowed hard. Maybe I am. Her breath caught, just enough for me to notice, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. The air between us was fragile, full of words we couldn't speak. Then she stepped back, exhaling softly. "You should go before it gets dark," she said, her tone steady, but her eyes saying something else entirely. As I walked toward the gate, she called out one last time, her voice low, almost thoughtful. "You really are learning faster than I expected." That night, I didn't sleep. I just replayed that look, the one that said the line between teasing and something real had already been crossed. The following week, everything felt off balance, like every glance, every word between us carried a weight we both pretended not to feel. I told myself I'd stop visiting for a while, give things space to settle. But then she texted, "I made too much tea. Come help me finish it." It was early evening when I arrived. The sun was setting through the kitchen window, painting the counter in a soft amber glow. She stood by the stove in a cream-colored cardigan, stirring something gently, the steam rising in slow, lazy curls. "Glad you came," she said, her tone light, but her smile different, softer somehow, more tired. I asked if she was okay, and she nodded. "Just one of those days," she murmured. "Too quiet in the house. Makes you think too much." We sat at the table, cups between us, the clinking of spoons filling the silence. It wasn't awkward this time. It felt honest, like both of us were too tired to pretend anymore. After a while, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to know." I looked up, and she smiled faintly. He was curious about everything. Always wanted to understand people, even when it hurt him. "Did you love him?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes softened, then looked away. "In my own way, yes. But love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's just about showing someone what they're capable of before you have to let them go." Her words lingered in the air, quiet but heavy. She took a slow sip of tea, then looked at me again. "You've grown a lot since I first met you," she said. "More than you realize. I see the way you think before you speak now. The way you listen." I smiled a little. Maybe I had a good teacher. Her lips curved, but her eyes didn't hide the emotion behind them. "Don't say that," she whispered. "You make it sound like I planned this." There was a tremor in her voice, the first crack in her calm. It made her seem more real than ever. I wanted to tell her everything, that I thought about her all the time, that her laughter stayed with me long after I left, that every little thing she did meant more than she probably knew. Instead, I just said, "You didn't have to plan it. Some things just happen." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached across the table, fingers brushing mine, a silent confession neither of us could put into words. Her hand was warm, steady, but when she finally pulled back, she smiled again, the teasing tone returning like armor. "You should go," she said softly, "before you make me say something I can't take back." Her voice trembled on that last word, and I knew she already had. It was late afternoon when I stopped by again, unsure whether I wanted to come or not. Ryan had texted that he'd be gone all weekend, and I found myself drawn to the quiet rhythm of her presence. The backyard was bright with sunlight, the garden in full bloom, and she was tending to the flowers, bending gracefully to water the tulips. Her long black hair caught the light, and the subtle fragrance of roses mingled with the warm air. She looked up as I stepped through the gate, her dark brown eyes meeting mine, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Back so soon?" she asked, her voice calm, teasing, but with an underlying softness. "I thought I'd check on the garden," I said, though the truth was I didn't need a reason. She laughed softly, that quiet, musical laugh that made the air feel warmer. "The plants are fine. I think it's you who needs checking on." We worked side by side, her hands occasionally brushing mine when passing tools or adjusting a plant. Each touch was light, but it left a lingering warmth, like a thread weaving us closer. The sun highlighted the gentle curves of her face, the soft laugh lines around her eyes, the slight tanned glow of her skin. She wore a simple sundress, pale yellow with small white flowers, and I couldn't help noticing how naturally elegant she looked, graceful, confident, and completely herself. At one point, I reached for a watering can, and our hands collided. She looked at me, dark brown eyes wide, then tilted her head with that teasing, knowing smile she had mastered over the years. "Clumsy today?" she asked, but her voice carried a quiet, intimate playfulness. "I didn't mean to," I stammered, feeling my pulse quicken. "You never do," she said softly, stepping closer, and for a moment, our faces were near enough that I could feel her warmth and faintly catch the scent of her perfume. Subtle, floral, lingering. I wanted to speak, to say something, but the words tangled in my throat. The air between us was electric yet tender, filled with unspoken understanding. She rested a hand lightly on my shoulder, just a brush, but it anchored me, steady and reassuring. "It's nice having you here," she murmured, almost to herself. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. The sunlight, the quiet, the way she looked at me like she already knew the secrets I hadn't said aloud. Finally, she stepped back, giving me a small, deliberate smile. "Go before Ryan comes back and ruins this moment with his chaos," she teased lightly. I nodded, trying to hide how much my heart was racing. But even as I walked away, I knew the memory of her hand, her glance, her soft laugh, would linger, warm, bright, impossible to ignore. Something had shifted. The teasing, the warmth, the closeness wasn't just subtle anymore. It was real, and I realized that no matter how much I tried to act casual, the distance between us was shrinking slowly, quietly, and irresistibly. The last weekend of summer arrived with a gentle warmth, golden sunlight spilling across the backyard where the garden was now alive with color. Ryan had gone off for a short trip, leaving the house unusually quiet. I found myself walking toward the back porch, drawn by the familiar sight of her arranging the flowers, her long black hair falling loosely over her shoulders. The light caught the subtle curves of her face, highlighting the faint laugh lines and the warmth in her dark brown eyes. She wore a light lavender sundress that moved softly in the breeze, graceful and effortless, every movement radiating the calm confidence she always carried. When she saw me, her smile was slow, deliberate, teasing, but there was something more in it, quiet vulnerability that made my chest tighten. "You're here again," she said softly, almost as if she were surprised but also relieved. "I couldn't stay away," I admitted, my voice barely above the hum of the garden. She tilted her head, studying me, that same steady gaze that had captivated me all summer. "Some things are hard to resist," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The movement was casual, but I felt it, the warmth of her fingers brushing past my arm as she did it. We spent the afternoon together, tending to the flowers, watering, laughing quietly at small mishaps, the world outside seeming to vanish. Each touch, a hand brushing mine while passing a pot, a gentle nudge as we leaned to adjust a plant, carried a weight, an intimacy that neither of us tried to explain. The teasing glances, the soft smiles, the warmth in her eyes were louder than any words. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with golds and soft pinks, she stepped closer. "You've grown so much," she murmured, her voice low, intimate. "Not just taller, not just older, but deeper. You notice things now, feel things differently." I looked at her, heart pounding, and realized the full depth of what had developed over these weeks. The teasing lessons, the quiet afternoons, the shared silences, it had all led to this. She reached out, her hand brushing lightly against mine, lingering just enough to send a shiver through me. "Sometimes," she said softly, Someone comes into your life and teaches you more than you ever expected. You just learn to follow along. Her words were gentle, but they carried a gravity that rooted me to the spot. I didn't need to speak. The warmth of her hand, the light in her eyes, the softness of her presence said everything. For a long moment, we simply stood there, hands touching, breathing in sync, the garden bathed in the soft glow of late summer. Finally, she stepped back, a small, satisfied smile on her lips. "Go on," she whispered, "before the moment gets even harder to leave." I lingered for a second longer, committing every detail to memory. Her warmth, the sway of her hair, the quiet power of her presence. That summer had changed something inside me. The teasing, the lessons, the closeness wasn't fleeting. It was real, slow, and patient. And as I walked away, I knew that no matter what came next, the bond we had formed would linger, subtle and unspoken, long after the season ended. It was the summer I learned what it felt like to truly see someone and be seen in return.